I'm Kari from Robocorp, and I'm here to show you a bit more in-depth example of the conversion tooling that we have for Gen1 robots. So in this video, I will go through converting a Blue Prism robot into robot framework, hitting some of the key points along the way. I'm hoping we're able to provide some chapter marks in YouTube so that you can jump into the different interesting parts easily. So let's see what we can do on that front. Also, I'll insert the standard links in the description comment in here. So we'll try to collect all of the links that I mentioned during this video in the description. But let's get started on some chatter first. So basically, the first thing that I want to highlight is the fact that you should really start from our documentation. So the conversion document, our documents page has the conversion page that contains kind of the getting started, the things you need to kind of look into, and we have playbooks and guides on the conversion tooling. So for example, examples on what to export and how to export from these different tools are guided in here in the documentation. The documentation is also your friend when you actually start to convert and you need to implement some things during the conversion, because we have the keyword libraries and things like that documented on this website. We're also please remember that the video, the conversion that I'm showing is at the time of this video, and we're constantly kind of developing it. So we will improve it over time. And if you have any bots that kind of real life bots that you are able to share, please do not hesitate to contact us in our development Slack or forum or whatever means you need to get in touch with us. We really live off the bots that we're able to get. We're not that interested in the simple bots that are shared openly, but rather the real life cases of actual production bots, because there's a vast gap between those two. So enough chattering, let's get started. And we'll start with Automation Studio. That's where we have our conversion tooling at the moment. We are looking to put it in the VS Code as well, but let's get started on this front. So the bot that I'm converting is RPA challenge bot done in Blue Prism. So I'll get started with the conversion in Automation Studio. So this is kind of in our introductory video already, that basically Automation Studio and the conversion already provides a really good kind of documentation around scaffolding and documentation of what the bot is actually doing at the moment. So we have the Flow Explorer. This is also available in VS Code already. So basically this you can use to get an idea of what the bot is doing. So even without knowing what this bot is, I would be able to see here that, okay, it's workbooks, remove empty rows, there's some Excel stuff going on, and then we're filling a form. So you can get a really good idea of the bot in here. You can also go into the code view and see the kind of things that if our conversion hits a place that it cannot convert, like a mysterious kill process thing, we try to extract as much information from the source system as we can, and so it give a comment that you need to go here and check it out, and then give as much details as we can around the topic. And then on the Automation Studio, the visual editor is of course here, and you can get a bit more detailed items like variable names and stuff like this here. So this is kind of the general idea, that when you start the conversion, first get the lay of the land, so to speak. So understand what the problem is that the bot is solving. And once you get that, you can actually start to dig in that, okay, yeah, this is what it is, and we can then start moving ahead. So for example, if I were to run this bot now, even in an Automation Studio, I can see that I get an error. And this stems from one of the facts that we're trying to avoid as much as we can. This bot, it is executing the RPA challenge site, but it's not downloading the Excel it assumes that the Excel file is bundled with the bot. And the way that it's done means that the robot itself, the exports from Blue Prism do not contain that Excel. It's not contained in the export format, so it's already broken. It works on the machine that magically has the Excel file, but on this after export, it's missing. And that's one of the things that we like to avoid as much as possible. So let's see if we can get this fixed. This is usually the point that, well, while I'm a mid-tier developer with a funny title of director, I still am much more comfortable in VS Code and just coding these things. So I'm not a professional robot framework coder by any means. We have gurus in our company who can do that, but I can still kind of get this kind of thing done quite easily. So what we produce out of the converter is just a robot like anything else, so I can actually jump into VS Code and start figuring this one out. So I'll open up, maybe I'll organize my views a bit and get the correct items visible. Just a, so yeah, I'll open up the RPA challenge next to my code so we can understand what we're doing. So essentially, this is the rpachallenge.com, and the idea is that we should download the Excel, start the challenge, then fill in this form with all the details coming from the Excel and submitting them and correctly identifying them. So this is basically changing the layout every time you run and providing an adequate challenge of handling Excels and also doing browser automations. But even without knowing that much about what the challenge is, I can start from the code and looking at the tasks. So I can see that we have some environment variables here, we have the main task, and we have split the incoming process into keywords. So we have a bunch of keywords here. At the moment, I don't know what half of these do, but I can just start following up the process. So I start from the task and I go into this first keyword, and I can immediately see that, okay, this is where the beef is at. So let's get started. Creating instance, opening workbook with the environment variable challenge file path. And this was what I was mentioning, that it's assuming that we have an Excel file that doesn't come with the export. So this is what broke in the Automation Studio run. But from here, I can immediately see that, yeah, this is just Excel handling, and we have some extra stuff like removing empty rows and stuff like that we don't really need to do. And this is one of those things that if you go to our certificate courses, so 1 to 3, you will be ready enough on the robot framework that you can actually do these things already by just knowing that, okay, there is an Excel library, you can use it. You don't need to convert all of these items as is. And that's pretty much what we're trying to do with the converter as well, is we're trying to remove the complexity. But there are complexities in the source systems that we always cannot kind of unravel, or at least yet unravel everything. So basically what I see here is that the first thing that I do not want to do is I do not want to bring in the Excel into this robot, because again, that makes it brittle, and I think it breaks the rules of this challenge. We should start by downloading the Excel as it is in here, because it can change. So if I put the Excel into this robot, and the side change is I have a broken bot. That is the definition of a brittle bot. So what I would do is, let's start by download the Excel. So let's make a keyword out of it, and then I probably want to download. So this is one of the cool things about VS Code and our documentation as well, is that you just start typing what you want to do. I want to download an Excel file. So I know it's an HTTP site, and if I go there, it gives me the documentation. This is where I'll point out to our documentation as well. So if you don't find it, your documentation is your friend. So just type in download there, and you can see the same documentation. So I can go into the documentation and I can see that, okay, yeah, we have examples here, and then kind of the full documentation of all the kind of actions that you can do with this this library, for example. But as I said, it's quite straightforward with the VS Code itself. So essentially, what I would now need to do is give it a URL, and I can get that URL from the website. So basically, copy link address, and I'll do it like that. So boom. What this does is it just gets me the Excel into the robot folder. And it does it every time I run, so I don't have to rely on the fact that I have the Excel stored correctly. I can also clean this up a bit. So these are the kind of style items, and looking into the documentation side, you can do things that really help out in the thing. So for example, I'm adding this override true so that it can actually download the Excel every time, and it's always overriding the old one without asking anything. So there, we have the download Excel done. And that frees us off from using the kind of the variable. So let's put our keyword to use, so there. And that basically means that we don't need this one at all. But then we clearly see that, yeah, there's Excel handling in here. So let's write something like read Excel to table. So kind of, I could go through this and check out that, okay, there's a create instance, there's open workbook, there's get data, there's close instance, and there are things like remove empty rows. This is one of those things that we don't need to do. The RPA Excel files library, when you read it in, it already excludes automatically all the empty rows and columns and stuff like that. So I know for a fact that that's not needed. We don't even open up an Excel instance. So we're not running the application, so we will not need the open instance and close instance. And also, because we're not using a local file from the environments, I can actually drop the open workbooks as well. And if I drop the open workbooks, I also do not need any global variable pointing to the Excel file. So already we cleaned up like a bunch of stuff from the robot code. So instead of this, we can pretty much just do something like this. So that gets rid of the Excel stuff, and we should be left with this. So yeah, now our purpose is to open the challenge Excel that we downloaded and read its data into a table. So we just need the data. We're not interested in Excel per se. So maybe we'll do open workbook. And yeah, this is the difference. So we can open it in Excel, but because of the fact that we do not need to interact with Excel stuff, we can just use the files. So let's do that. Because we know that this always downloads into the folder of the robot, we don't need to do anything except that. Then we'll read the content. Let's make it a table. And then we want to read stuff from the Excel. So read probably worksheet. Yeah, I want it as a table, so I'll take that. And yeah, based on the documentation header, yeah, I want the headers because I know I will need those. So I'll put header through there. Actually, let's type it correctly. So there we have read the Excel into the table. Then let's probably close the workbook because we opened it. And then we need to return stuff. So let's return the table as an output. Just stumbling a bit, so this shows that I am not the most proficient robot framework coder, but I'm getting by. So there. So essentially, those 4 lines is enough for us to get a fully formatted table out of an Excel. And this is then basically JSON data. You can handle it and you can set it into a variable like this. So that should be it. Let's move on with the example. So here is another thing that I see that is a really bad habit, kind of that comes out of these visual designers and the Gen1 tooling especially. So the naming of variables, the scope of variables is highly dependent. In the case of Blue Prism, you have subsets that can have the same name can come over and over again. So here, for example, we have the list of the items in the Excel named data, and then we for loop it. We do the for loop over it, and all the item names are also data. So this would work, and this works in Robot Framework, but this is highly confusing. So I'd much rather just rename this, because we know that we're probably dealing with persons. So I'll name it as a person, and for the list, I'll just give a multiple. So this makes a lot more sense immediately. So then there's this mysterious launch challenge item here. So let's follow it. So it's a launch challenge, and it's then calling RPA challenge launch. And then we see some weirdness. We see some kill process, launch Internet Explorer probably, and wait. This is another thing that highlights kind of some of the bad practices. This already seems to be assuming that we have left some processes from the previous runs that we need to make sure that have been killed. This, again, is an item that comes straight out of the box with Robot Framework. It is a test automation platform in its roots. So things like teardown and cleanups are really, really kind of just handled. So processes should not be left behind, which makes it so that we don't have to kill the previous processes. Also, we really don't want to use Internet Explorer for this, and we definitely do not want to wait if we don't have to. So my solution to this would be to just let's get rid of everything here. And at the same time, I pick up the fact that, yeah, there's a cleanup step here. So at that point, I would do a teardown phase in here. And because, so this would be a place for me to even make a bigger keyword to close, make sure that all the Excel stuff is closed. But because I closed the workbook already, I guess I'll just handle the closing of the browsers in here. So basically, I'll just call close all browsers. So the teardown step is also a built-in item from Robot Framework, and it makes sure that this keyword gets called no matter what happens in the execution of the previous keywords. So that handles the cleanup phase. And again, we got a bunch of stuff away. In VS Code, I can see the errors immediately on the right-hand panel. So I can jump to here. Okay, I don't need to do this. So I can clean this up, and then I'm back in here. So the launch channel, looking at this, is basically opening this website and clicking the start button. So let's do it the same way. And let's make it a keyword, also separating this. So what do we want to do? We want to open a browser. And we have multiple options, so we can open up a specific browser or we can just open up any available browser. So this keyword handles, it finds the browser that you have by default. So if you have Chrome, it starts Chrome. I'm a bit of an old school guy, so I have Opera, so it will probably launch Opera in my case. And where do we want to open it? We take the URL there, and that's it. That's basically what we need to do. And then on the site, yeah, we need to click the start button. So rather than doing anything yet with locators or any kind of fancy things, I would just click button and give it the name of the button, so that, or the text in the button. That should work. So then we can replace the launch channel with our launch channel. So at this point, we have downloaded the Excel, read the Excel into a variable, and then launched the site. So this would be the point where I would start running for the first time. So you can just run it, and or you can debug it in VS Code. So let's run it to that point and see what happens. Did I manage to get a demo effect or not? So this is where the rest of the tooling comes into play, and we have, I think, several items on it. So we're now using RCC to set up the environment and getting a clean environment. And it's starting up the browser. So it launched Chrome because I have Chrome installed. It's opening it to the RPA challenge site. And you can see that it clicked the start because it started the round one input. So yeah, we got to where we wanted. So before going into the for loop, I can show you that, yeah, now we got the challenge Excel downloaded in here. You can also open it externally now to kind of see what's going on. So basically, this is what we have in the Excel. We have names and columns and all of this stuff. Good. So we are really far along in our main task. We now have 3 lines and we have 3 keywords to handle those items. But in total, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like the 10 rows of code that we could have written just directly in here. But it's also always good practice to write these into keywords, because then again, you can make these keywords into common libraries that you can share with the other people that are coming with the more elaborate conversions, and they can just leverage these existing keywords that you have made. But let's get cracking with the for loop. So obviously the for loop seems to be meant to input the fields into these input fields and then pressing submit. I'd maybe start from the submit button because this looks weird. And this also, I know that the conversion, why we have 1 out of 2 kind of namings here is again with the naming. So the same submit name is used over and over again, and we need to kind of separate between those. So our conversion has to do this extra naming on top of it. So let's follow the submit. It goes again into this kind of a method, which goes into another kind of a method, which is basically probably just trying to find this submit button and clicking it. So rather than trying to convert all of these, again, I just let's just get rid of these, because we know we need to click that button. So let's click that button rather than doing all of these extra steps. So let's go in here and we have the submit there. So just like we clicked the start button, let's try clicking the submit button. And yeah, we have a bunch of these features, but let's maybe run this through just with a normal run to see if it's responding to our attempts correctly before even trying to kind of locate the fields or input the data into those. So again, we're starting up. I managed to add some error into there, so I can just look at the log. So yeah, this is one of those things that that robot framework comes out of the box. So as you see, I don't have any log lines in the code itself, but it's always generating this report HTML. And there I can immediately see that, okay, permission denied, challenge Excel. So thank you, Windows. I have Excel open, so the file is locked. So please close the freaking Excel before you run the bot. Now I know, so let's get that fixed. So now it's always starting the browser in the different view. So let's check what happens now. So what I'm expecting it to do is to start the challenge and then just submit a bunch of times like it did there without inputting anything into the fields. So we now know that the loop is working. I also now notice that, because I know that this challenge has a result and you should kind of report the results. So this is also missing a report functionality. So let's a reminder to myself. So let's add that later. But let's dig into this form filling first. So there's obviously a separate action in the Blue Prism bot for each of these fields. They all seem to be using the same write data, which are using a dynamic reader and writer. So these are some custom actions that have been made by the bot developer that we are not able to convert yet. But this already is kind of saying to me that, yeah, this is dealing with locators. So it's trying to locate a label with the type input on this page. Now, I also know that this page is nasty. Not all the fields are of type input. So I'm highly doubtful that this would have worked fully. So this will probably not get a 100% score in this challenge if the locators are done in that way. But basically, I also know that, yeah, we have our locator support. So again, the X comes out and I can just, I don't want to do it like this. And as I know, I've done a bunch of our examples, but also again, the training courses run you through the web automation. So we don't need these. And that makes basically, yeah, I also don't want to make separate fields for each of the items. This seems like just excessive methods in my mind. So let's just do this another way. So locators. I'll highlight this. So this is the way to do locators in our tooling. These the same locators are available now in Automation Studio and VS Code, and we are also looking to add things like recorders and stuff like that. But let's do locators now. So I just started our inspector from the tool. So what it does, it opens up a browser that the inspector can access. I need to navigate to the site that I want to pick the items from. This UI will change, so please bear in mind that changes are coming, but this already is kind of good enough for doing this basic kind of picking. So basically, when I start to pick, I get a highlight. I can pick buttons, fields, titles, whatever. So let's start doing this. So it always kind of tries to find different options of web locators. So based on ID, based on name, based on CSS identifier attributes, and an XPath using the input label name. So yeah, address looks good to me. I'll save it as a locator and give it a name. And then I just keep going. So now I saved, I can pick up the next one. This is the first name, so let's take that. Save as first. I'm a bit lazy with the locator naming here, so don't do as I do as I say. So yeah, naming the locators in a sensible way is always preferable, and giving them descriptive names so that anybody can use them. So these can also be shared from bot to bot, these locators. So keep that in mind when you're actually doing these things. But I'm cutting some corners to save some time here. But basically, this is the way that I can kind of keep going and just stay on the site, keep putting in the locators without kind of jumping back and forth. So I'll just record all of these. Company, 2 left. Let's do the phone number. Phone. And the last one, let's do the email. Email locator, like that. Okay, so now we're done. Let's close the inspector and see what we got. So now under the locators, we have all of the locators. You can go back and edit them. So what happens is it opens up the inspector and it opens up the page and highlights the thing that you had picked earlier. So this is a really good way of just, if the website would, for example, change, rather than editing all of your robot code, you go in and just edit the locator behind the alias. So the robot code doesn't have to change. You can just pick the new field and do it like that. But that's a bit of a offshoot from the actual action that we're doing. So we now have locators that we can use to input stuff into the browser. And basically, because we want to input text, let's see what we get if we want to input text. So yeah, RPA browser Selenium input text. That looks good to me. It's asking for a locator and then the text to put into that locator. So let's start from here. We can copy paste the name of the locator, so it's always alias and the locator name. You can also define these locators directly inline using XPath and CSS and all of that stuff. But again, just for maintenance and simplicity of reading, this is a good way of storing the locators and then doing it, then kind of referring to those always. Then we want some data out of the person. And this is where the coder in me jumps out. And this is what the visual designers are really kind of struggling to do. So rather than starting to type these individual rows, I know that I need this input text for all of these. And I know that I need to give the header name. So rather than typing everything in, I'll just use the grand old fashion of copy pasting. So yeah, let's do it. Let's do it like this, because this is just a more effective way. So I know that we can refer into these JSON items with the syntax like this. So we define the variable, and then under the brackets, we just refer to the column name. So basically, I can do this, which is slightly faster than typing everything by hand. So let me do this like that. And then we can get rid of all of this. And we just need to update the aliases that are related to these names. And yeah, so basically using the locator name that matches with the field value there. So first, last, company. We can also fill this in if we want to, but I'll just do this old-fashioned way. Role. What did we have? Addresses in place. Email. And phone. And that's it. Yeah, and then, as I said earlier, as a reminder to myself, I really want to capture the results of the execution. So basically, if I kind of go through this, I can show you that we can submit. We get the rounds through, and at the end we get this kind of a congratulation success rate and milliseconds. So basically, I could do a locator to pick up that what the element of this item, but I'll cheat a bit. So I'll take this in here. So basically, all that we need to do is capture element screenshot, and we give it at this point. This could be a locator, but this is the way to define a CSS locator inline in Robot Framework. So basically, all I need to do is I could put the collect results in here. And if we return none, we don't need to do the last return. So now, so what we did, we added the input text fields. So we don't need to do that structure of having a method for the first name, last name, all of those, because the inbuilt functionality of input text already handles all of that stuff. So why replicate it? Why kind of do that stuff? We can do it, but this, at least at this time, seems like a reasonable bot to me. So let's run it. Again, we get an environment build. And it starts. And again, I have the Excel open. So let's run it again. At this point, I don't even need to look at the log because I've done that Excel open warning so many times. So yeah, let's bring in the target browser in the view and see what we get. Okay, so now it's filling in the fields. Seems to be putting the correct values in the correct fields. But I managed to remove my submit button. So let's do that once more. I was a bit too eager on the deletion. So let's run it again. And actually press the submit button after each form. So now, let's see what we can get. So now it's actually pressing the submit button and filling in the forms no matter where the fields change. Going through the rounds. And it got a result. So let's look at the log. So yeah, and we can dig down deeper into these so we can see the persons that have been read in here. You see the for loop. We can actually see all the values that were run through in the for loop, and then we have our collect results thing, which is capturing an element, and it's showing that yeah, we got it done. It took 13 seconds, but 100 out of the fields were filled correctly. So a success. This is kind of the point where, yeah, where we started from and where we ended up. So we ended up with 50 lines of code. And what we did is we improved the stability of the robustness of the bot, because we're no longer relying on a static Excel file that is shipped with the bot. We're always downloading it from the source that we need to take it from. We also simplified the Excel reading and the launching of the actual website. So basically, any browser that you have on the machine will do. But you can also do fancy things like downloading Firefox, for example, into the environment using our Conda YAML and the RCC tooling. But that's a whole other story. And then we also added the collection of the results with which the initial bot did not have at all. And basically, this is already quite a good bot and would more than do what is needed to do. But as always, with the Python tooling and with the tooling we have, you can always go further. So as I said, I'm at most a mid-tier robot framework developer, and I guess the same goes for Python as well. So when we gave this RPA challenge to our actual robot developers, this is what the bot looks like at that point. So we're actually heavily using things like XPaths and really commanding the JavaScript of the site rather than talking with the element level using Selenium and stuff like that. So what we end up in that case is you give engineers a challenge and they jump at it. So let's see how fast this executes the thing. Let's see if I can get that. So this is the same bot, but actually optimized a lot. And we also have the yeah, you can already see that just the filling of the fields is significantly faster because we're talking directly to the JavaScript of the browser. So this is kind of a bit of a flex, but but still kind of along the idea that, yeah, let me open up the correct look. So the sky's the limit. That's I guess the main point here is that this completed in 2.5 seconds. And I know that the Python version goes even faster. I think the best result we've gotten is like 800 milliseconds, at which point the machine is the constraint, not the website or the yeah. It's all about the tool machine at that point. So yeah, that's the long way around with explanations converting a bot. So why I wanted to do this is kind of highlight the main domain differences coming from Gen1 into Robot Framework and Gen2 in general. Kind of thinking outside the box and kind of taking a step back. What was the problem? How can we do it? The converter gives you a scaffolding and a good idea of what the bot has been doing, but there are things that the converter can do. It cannot do all the optimization and the best ways of doing. So that's why we heavily recommend going through training courses. Once if you have the original system, so for example, in this case, if I were to have the Blue Prism bot open in Blue Prism next to me, and then I would have the knowledge of how to make it in a robot framework, all of this would also be kind of even simpler because I could always refer to the original system. So this is basically a blind conversion without the access to the original system. Again, to wrap it up, I would still like to kind of highlight our documentation. So definitely check this out. robocorp.com/docs/conversion. Here we have the basic guidelines to get started. So thank you for your time and see you in the Slacks.